okay? Today's Shir, he adds Nachazach. L'chayre, how could you say that mitzvahs and Avedas are all equal? Every mitzvah is a merkava for Pnim Yisrael and Chatzamiti, aka Achtas Hashem. Every Aveda is a merkava for Sitrachero, Klipa, Nika, Vezarav, Acher, and say that all distinctions are Roch Shtus. Torah makes distinctions. In Halacha, there's Kalas and Chamudas. Like Abi Oynish. For some Avedas, there's no punishment at all. For some Aveda, the punishment is Malchus. For other punishment, Aveda is Mises Bezin. And for other punishment, Mises Deshamayim. Look, Dalta Rebbe. Umasha Bekuach Nefesh Decha Shar Avedas. We find that when a person's life is in danger, he should do an Aveda. V'gam Yavid, he should violate the sin. V'al Yeharig and not be killed. You push aside doing Avedas to save a life. And you're Mechuyev. If someone threatens you and says, do this Aveda, I'll kill you, you should do the Aveda. Right? Except for three things, which indicates that there are kalas and chamuras. So the Alter Rebbe says it's not because these averes are not important, but faket, the gain is greater than the loss. Hainu kapirish Chazal. It's as the Chazal say, the Torah says, Chalei love of Shabbos achas, desecrate one Shabbos, Kadesh Yishma Shabbos is harbe, to keep many Shabboses. In other words, it's not the Pshat Hashem says these averes are not so terrible. It's the Pshat when it comes to most averes, we say V'chai b'hem, live and have a chance to do the avera tomorrow. In other words, three averes, the emes should also be V'chai b'hem. The Pnei but Abisha says, no, for these three you have to die. But his leniency, legabi other avedas, not because it's not important, but rather because you have to live. It's not because the other avedas, minus avedas other gilarois and shvechazam are not that serious. And he brings you a raya teda. I bring you a raya. Shahare. Shabbos, chamuro, shkulach avedas. Shabbos is worse than gilarois and shvechazam. It's compared to avedas. Shabbos and Avodah Zarah are put together in a tandem. Where? The Simon Beis in Yerdei, the beginning of Yerdei, which people who learn Smicha don't learn, but people who learn Shchita learn, is Shchita. And the Shaila is, who is a kosher Shechet? Frum is a kosher Shechet. What if a guy is Frum, but he has one problem? And one Aved is a Mumir. He's a Baltai, he can't help himself. But he's not a Mumir Lahachis, he's a Mumir Latayav, and he Pashat enjoys it. If the mumris of the mumir is Shabbos, he's a machal Shabbos, you can't trust the shchita. Because the mumir Shabbos is mumir l'chalaterikol. Shabbos is a ois, it's a covenant between Jewish people and God. A person of machal Shabbos cannot be trusted in any union. Because it's like a vedazar. Ma'ashe'enkim b'mumir l'gilei aroyas. If a person is a mumir l'gilei aroyas.
This mumir is even l'tiyavin?
Only l'tiyavin. If it's lahachis, it's another story. Only l'tiyavin. Lahachis he doesn't believe in God. The fact remains, the Bikuach Nefesh Decha Shabbos. You machal Shabbos to save a life, and even for stuff at Bikuach Nefesh, even Shaykh HaYishah. V'lei Gilei Aroyas. When it comes to Gilei Aroyas, you harik v'ayave. So what do we see? Which is worse, Shabbos or Gilei Aroyas? In the Prat of Mumer, Shabbos is worse. In the Prat of Yeharik v'ayave, Gilei Aroyas is worse. Allah, the Gzeres HaKosav. I'll tell you, it's a Chidish Nifla. That in Nigle Pashat. Any idea of Kalas and Chamuras in Halacha is Gzeres HaKosav. It's not the Pshat, a smaller Einish means a smaller Aveda. A bigger Einish means a bigger Aveda. Varai, there's Stiris. So when we say that for one Aveda you say to be Mechal, to save a life. Another Aveda you say die. It's not because this is more strict, this is less strict, it's Gzeres HaKosav. So therefore the Alter Rebbe says like this. When a person, he says two things. I'm repeating now yesterday. When a person decides, this is Choman, this is Kal, this I would never do, because it's the worst thing in the world, but this I can't help myself, it's a Ruach Shtus. And if he brings you a raya from Teira, das wissen azay, Kals and Chamuras and Teira Gzeres HaKosav. Kals and Chamuras and Teira is not because it's like Kal and Chomer. This is the Chiddush of this Tanya. The Chiddush of this Tanya is, look at mitzvahs and Avedas, not in terms of the time you have mitzvahs and Avedas, but in terms of the mitzvah ha-mitzvah. And then every mitzvah is a merkava for P'tim Mitzvah and Chavti Abiti, and every Aveda is a Merida, B'melech, Macham, Lacham, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and a merkava for Sitar Achar, or Klipa, Nikah, V'zav, L'kim, Achedim. Shoy. It's very powerful, this Pedic, Chav Dalet. The rest of the Pedic is now much more comfortable. We're going to go back to this really in Pedic Chafei. Now, the Rebbe is now going to say, Aba Yid v'chfarta Yid. Ela Novaden. Chocha filu taka, Pshas Maise, it's the worst thing in the world. He's worse than a mosquito. After a person sins, you can do tshuva. Any Aveda, which there's no death, spiritual cutting off, because when a person is spiritual cutting off, even if they're physically alive, Dr. Rebbe is going to say in Yigeres HaTshuva, you're biologically living, and a potato you're dead. This Gilgul, this Naran has been cut off from its Chaya Yechida. So Karas means the Shemaim is final, is irreversible. But otherwise, if it's not an Aveda of Karas Misa B'dei Shamayim, She'nafcha L'kis Mesa L'gamri. The divine soul hasn't died completely. V'nechazes Meishasha B'lekim Chayim, and been completely cut off from its root in the living God. Only part of the attachment to Hashem has been compromised. And its attachedness to this Aveda. What's the mashal for this? A chevel, right? You have a rope that's shazur, it's woven from Tayag Nimin, 613 strands, and Aveda cuts one of them, or cuts one of them in part. Except Karas and Misa B'dei Shmaim, which severs it completely. If it's severed, it's severed. It's cut, it's cut. Otherwise, there's only Lamed Vav Knesses and Beis Misas. Besides for those 38 in Yonim, it's only Malchus. You're cutting it in part. So first of all, you're still attached, and second of all, you can do tshuva. So the Rebbe Regam, Nafshech Yunis, Haba'amis, Hamalabeshet V'Gufei, even the Nefesh Habahamis. And V'chein Gufei, in the body, Chayzim Ve'elim, Miseterach Klipazu, can return from the Serach Klip this Aveda, Umeskarvim, the Kedushas Nefesh Alekis, and become again attached to the holiness of the Eivishter, Hamalabeshes Behem, which was invested in them. Amina by the Shem HaChadosh believes in them. In other words, after the Aveda, you can do tshuva. After the Aveda, you can do mitzvahs and so forth. Now, a couple of commentary. First of all, in Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe says you can fix even Karas Misa B'dei Shamayim. He gives that marshal. Could you imagine, says the Alter Rebbe, that a new medicine will come along, which will permit people to reattach people's heads to their bodies? This is the marshal he gives. He says there's an inyan from tshuva that can reattach the head to the body. Karas Misa, you cut yourself off from the shadish, and he says the way it's done is Avinu Malkeinu. He touches like this. When a person does a Veda which is not Karas Misa, you have to have Rachmanas on yourself. But when you cut yourself off completely, you can't have Rachmanas on yourself. So he said to the Eibishter, the Rachmanas on me is so big that I have no Rachmanas on myself, and therefore, but the Alter Rebbe says in the Likutei Torah and Anila Deidi, you can even fix Karas Misa B'dei Shmaim. The only thing you cannot fix is Adam Yirah Leinayim Vavai Yirah Levav Misa B'dei Adam. There is no way to correct except through Misa. There's no tshuva for it, because the Bezdin cannot say we trust your tshuva. A person is mechuyev to get through his aynish, which is in from kapar Hagor. Of course, it's all measurable. The size of the pagam in the nefesh and in lamayla. The midok, the correction, the cleaning, and the punishment in Gehenna, in this world, the chalev v'chet, for each sin has a einish meyuchad. There's a particular punishment. Lamarek, to clean, or lahaver alichloch v'apkam, to remove the filth of the blemish. The correction is proportional. In other words, this is the other side of the coin. What's the other side of the coin? One side of the coin is any Aveda. You're mekabel with the drachar of klipa nika with the kemached. Any mitzvah is a mekabel p'nim mitzvah chafshamite. You missed it, you ruined. What's the other side of the coin? Every Aveda is individual. The punishment of Aveda is not so terrible. Some Avedas only cut you a little bit. Other Avedas cut you more. Certain Avedas are cut, some means cut you off completely. In other words, like this. When we look at an Aveda, we have to look at every Aveda as Ksitarachar or Klipanik, every Aveda is a Midmach Makadosh Baruch Hu. When the Eibush to fixes us, he doesn't look at it that way. Right? How do people come up with Kalas and Chamudas? This is a big Aveda, this is a small Aveda. So Alter Rebbe says you can't look at Avedas that way. You have to look at every Aveda as a Midit Machmach Makadosh Baruch Hu. It's a Merkava v'Sitrachar a Klip and Aveda Baruch Hu. You understand? But when it comes to tshuva, to fixing it, and when it comes to kapara, to the Eibush to helping you do tshuva, he looks at it the other way. Takeh. You follow what I'm saying? That a small Aveda requires a small tshuva. We're not allowed to look at it that way, because then we'll do Avedas and we'll have Ruach Shtus. But when the Eibush corrects us, he looks at it in a generous way. And I'll give you the simple mashal for it. Goy Mashav Mitzvahs Neneach. By a goy, the din is any one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Chizayv is chayav misa. Now, frequently the halacha is chayav misa, but you don't give him misa. But he has a din ktala, he's a din misa. Why? Because the Eibush, when it comes to goyim, he judges them the way he describes how we have to judge ourselves. Right? If a person has made it b'malchus, person rebels against the king, what's the halacha? You kill him. Why? It doesn't make a difference if you're rebelling against the king, if the king says pick up the garbage, he doesn't pick it up. Or the king doesn't go to the front and he doesn't go. It's the same misa. Why? Because it doesn't go by what you did, it goes against whom you did it. You rebelled against the king, you're dead. Right? And the Lashon Chazal is Gavr Ktila Kotel. A king is the Shadish of Chayis. If you don't listen to a king, you've cut yourself off from your Shadish. If you cut yourself off from your Shadish, you're already dead. A guy who violates any one of Shav Mitzvahs Neneach has rebelled against the king. He's cut himself off from his root. He's dead already. He's biologically alive. He's spiritually dead. It doesn't make a difference if it's a big Aveda or it's a small Aveda. Favos, it's from the Eibishter. When it comes to Yidden, there's a different set of rules. There's a Rachmanis. You have to look at the Aveda as a saying, did this cut me from the Eibishter completely? Finished. When the Eibishter corrects, you understand? He looks at it differently. This is the good sky. This is the Rachmanis here. That you could correct it. And he says, "V'chein b'chai v'mises v'koris ein pegam kula b'shav." There's a difference even in mises and koris on the effect of the pagam. I suppose this means which madrega of the naran is cut off, and whether it's reparable, like I said to you from the Likutei Torah Pachas the Re'eh, and the day that you could repair even mises and koris. So the way you have to view this is like this: when it comes to Sheva mises neneach, comes to a goy, yeah, every avera that he'll commit is a iyum from cutting himself off from the Eibishter. And the punishment reflects that. When it comes to a Yid, every Aveda cuts him off from the Eibishter. When it comes to the punishment, only cuts from Misa cuts him off completely. Other Avedas he can do tshuva for. And the punishment and the correction of the Eibishter is not like you did a Inyan that cuts him off from the Eibishter. In other words, the Eibishter, as Rachmana San Yidin, punishes based not on whom he rebelled against, but what the act of rebellion was. You get the point? Verstanden, Yankele? You understand? This is point one. And then there's a vagam. The first point is, this is a very favorable shtickle. Even though we were saying the whole time all Avedas are equal, they cut yourself off from the Eibishter completely. But when it comes to correction, that's not how you have to look at it. How the Eibishter looks at it. Look at it on the severity of the Aveda or the slightness of the Aveda. But there's even a bigger chiddush. That not only could a Yid come back to the Eibishter because the Neshama is attached to the Eibishter, but you should know that as far as the Neshama is concerned, that when a Yid is doing an Aveda, his Neshama at that moment is attached to the Eibishter. In other words, your Pnimius is attached to the Eibishter and sinning. When we do an Aveda, our Neshama is in Golos. What does Golos mean? It's trapped over there, and he cannot express it over Shoyim, Heim, Libam, B'Shusim, Libam, B'Shusim, Klau. The Neshama is crying to the Yid and say, don't cut his from the Eibishter, and the person doesn't hear. Hamachatiyas aguf, that makes the body sin. Umeridasi iman, drags it down together with itself. Be'imke she'el, the depths of the abyss lamata mata tachas tumas. Here we go again. Hasitir achara o klipas avedazara havai yishmereim. That even when we're doing the Aveda, we're forcing the Neshama to descend into Klippa, but the Neshama is loyal to the Eibishter. So there's 2 points. First of all, we could return to the Eibishter. Second of all, we've never been completely separated from the Eibishter, but it's not the Neshama. Now recall that in Sof Perek Yudalef, the Alter Rebbe said that even a Rosh Gomer, who has no Charata, in Eifed of Makev, Hakol Be'asar, Shchint Shayel Yelam, even in a Rosh Gomer. And now the Alter Rebbe concludes with some more uncomfortable words. Since it's true that after an Aveda you can return to Hashem, because except for Misas and Krisis, the Eibush gives a chance to do tshuva. B, the Neshama attached to the Eibush, even while we're doing the Aveda. Says the Alter Rebbe, think about what you're doing. When you're doing an Aveda, it's not just you're rebelling against the Eibush, you're taking your Neshama and abusing it. There can be no greater exile for the Neshama, from the point of the Neshama which is always loyal to Hashem. From the greatest heights of Chuli and so forth to the greatest lows. Commission is Baya Liel, as we discussed earlier in chapter 18. The shade, the Shemakei Nafsh Kol Beis or Terek Berik Beis. The root and source of the Neshama of Kol Beis is all of every single Jew. Who mechach melas nebish et chach. Who is Barach Masiyach and Chuli Hashem and Chachma 1, as we discussed in chapter Beis 2. V'hu, when you do an Aveda, and the Neshama continues to be at that moment loyal to the Eibishter, it's kemosh, like for example, take the head of a king, and drag it down. And bury his face inside a basic full of tseya, full of excrement. There could be no greater shame than this. Even as being done temporarily, because the klip is called waste, excreta as it's called. It's waste. It's junk. And when I'm doing an Aveda, I am forcing my Neshama, which is simultaneously loyal to the Eibishter, to collaborate an Aveda. And it's a very, very demeaning thing as far as the Neshama is concerned. Shine. So Chav Gimel and Chav Dalet taught us to look at mitzvahs and Avedas in a different light. Every mitzvah is Achtos Hashem. Every Aveda is Aveda Zara Mamish. But you should know that when it comes to punishment and correction, the Eibishter becomes nice. And he says you could fix it. Because he doesn't look at it in terms of the Merida against the Melech, like he does by Goyim. He looks at it in terms of the individual Aveda, except for Kisah Misa best. But he said, but he says it's not a good idea doing Aveda because your neshama, which is loyal to Hashem, is never being shamed in the act of Aveda.